In our last video on wisdom, and I'll leave a link below in the notes to that video if you haven't seen it, in any event, in our last video we saw that one of the Buddha's key qualities of a wise person was, as he says, mental mastery. That is, the ability to think what you want to think and not to think what you don't want to think. But how many of us can actually do that? Have you ever known with total clarity what the right thing to do is, and then done the exact opposite? You make a resolution to eat better, to be kinder, to exercise more, to meditate more, only to find yourself falling back into your old habits. The question for us today is, what is going on in that moment where we're falling back? Well, here we come to a kind of a crossroads. In the West, we often understand this as a moment of what's known as weakness of the will. This diagnosis implies a kind of personal failing, a lack of willpower or self-control. The solution from this kind of view is simply to try harder. But early Buddhism offers a different diagnosis and therefore a different solution. The problem in early Buddhism, or says the Buddha we might say, the problem is not a weak will, but instead a mistrained intention. And therefore the solution to us isn't to simply try harder, but instead to cultivate a wiser kind of practice. So, having said that, let's dive a little bit deeper here. Perhaps nobody in history has captured this struggle more powerfully than St. Augustine in his Confessions, where he famously prayed to God, "Grant me chastity and continence, but not yet." Augustine says that he realized that the search for wisdom was so much more important than mere earthly success or the search for earthly successes, and yet he himself was unable to turn away from these worldly aims. His solution was to pray that he would eventually be able to, but not yet. That is, he'd like to pursue wisdom, but somewhere down the line later on. Now, this "not yet" is really the essence of our problem. It illustrates the gap between our highest aspirations and our immediate desires and intentions. For Buddhism, however, for early Buddhism, this gap is not due to some kind of, let's say, weakness. It's the predictable outcome of wrong intentions. Now, what are those wrong intentions? What is that wrong intention we might have? It's essentially the intention to put our own true well-being off until some long-term future that may indeed never arrive. But to truly understand wrong intention, I think we first have to know what right intention is. In the Buddhist Eightfold Path, right intention is indeed one of the key steps. It's defined simply as the intention of renunciation, the intention of non-ill will, and the intention of harmlessness. And these are the directions that we resolve to point our minds in our practice. Now, faced with a mind that says "not yet," we are, as I say, at a crossroads as to what kind of cure we're going to pursue. And as we've seen, there are two different proposals in front of us. If the problem is a weak will, is that we don't have a strong enough will or strong enough willpower, the only solution is to find more willpower. We can, indeed, perhaps bolster this will of ours with better reasoning or perhaps more kind of self-discipline. But at the end, willpower comes down to an issue of what we might term sort of mental toughness. In fact, the Buddha described very well this kind of brute force method in visceral terms, saying that, with teeth clenched and tongue pressed against the roof of the mouth, they should squeeze, squash, and crush mind with mind, like a strong man who grabs a weaker man by the head or the throat or shoulder and squeezes, squashes, and crushes them. This solution presents us with an uphill battle against ourselves. However, if the problem is wrong intention instead, then our solution is going to be different. It's not going to be one of crushing the mind with the mind, but instead merely one of continued practice. In particular, practice of paying attention to our direct experiences. Specifically, it's the practice of experiencing the downfall, what we might call the downfall. That is the inherent stress and suffering involved in our unskillful thoughts and actions. We can analogize this experience to when we touch a hot stove. Our parents can give us 1,000 good reasons not to touch a hot stove, but it's the direct, painful experience of the heat that truly teaches us the lesson. Buddhist practice, similarly, is about developing sensitivity to feel this kind of pain of heat, of a greedy or angry thought, so that we can pull our hands back, pull our hands away before that thought causes us serious burns and indeed causes people around us serious burns, which is what happens when we act on it. The Buddha taught us a method for developing this kind of sensitivity. He didn't simply tell us to suppress our thoughts. He taught us how to investigate those thoughts wisely in order to eventually help remove the power that they have over us. And we can illustrate the Buddha's technique here in 2 key steps. The first step is to engage mindfully with our thinking, to recognize what sorts of thoughts are arising in us. Are those thoughts of greed, of anger, let's say of cruelty, for example? We simply take time to notice the character of these thoughts before we act upon them. The second step is to investigate the nature of the thought. That is, where does this thought and the action and conditions lead us? What kind of thought is it in the sense of where would it lead us? Would the thought lead us to peace, or instead to agitation? Would the thought lead us to greater connection with others, or instead to greater conflict with others? Is this thought actually pleasant to hold in mind? When we engage with this kind of practice repeatedly over a long period of time, remarkable things can happen, and I've witnessed this in my own practice. That is, we'll find often that we stop avoiding harmful actions simply because we should avoid them, and we start avoiding harmful actions because we begin to see clearly and understand on a kind of gut level that these actions are a source of pain for us right here and right now, and indeed into the future. And this, I would submit, is where the real transformation lies. Our motivations shift from a kind of guilt over our weakness of the will, let's say, to wisdom about what's really causing us suffering. This strategy of practice means that our progress along the path, is not going to be in a straight line. Instead, it's a process of continuous resolve, where the crucial skill isn't so much willpower, but simply being present. We know that we're going to falter along the way many times. We know that old, unskillful habits are going to reappear. But these are not simply a failure of our own willpower or of something fundamentally wrong or broken within us. Instead, they should be seen as crucial learning opportunities. That is, when unskillful things arise, that gives us a chance to experience the downfall and suffering that's conditioned by these kinds of wrong intentions. being present with this syndrome as it continues to happen in us over months and years can help to strengthen our resolve to get back on the right path. So progress begins with our intention. The decision to put the first foot forward, to keep walking, and to crucially pick ourselves up compassionately and get back on that path when we wander off into one ditch or another, which we will do. So this practice of working with our intentions is a cornerstone of the entire Eightfold Path, which is why right intention is indeed one of the stages in that path. And to see how right intention fits into the bigger picture of Buddhist practice, I'd recommend my playlist on the Eightfold Path in Buddhism. And I'll leave a link to that playlist up here on the screen. If you're getting something out of these videos of mine, consider taking a look at my Patreon page, which is linked here up on the screen and down below in the notes, and see if you want to help support the channel and the work that I'm doing here. Thanks so much for watching, and be well.